In 2019, marine scientists wanted to answer a question that had never been tested before. Not how do deep-sea animals eat a whale, but what happens when something completely unfamiliar lands on the ocean floor. So they did something almost nobody would think to try. They took 3 dead alligators, weighted them down, and lowered each one over 6,000 feet into the Gulf of Mexico, an animal that has never, in its evolutionary history, belonged in the deep sea. What happened next led to a discovery nobody was expecting, not just about scavengers, but about an entirely new species living inside the bones themselves. Welcome back to the Abyss Report. This is the real story of the alligators that fed the deep sea.
The study was led by researchers at the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium. Their real question was about carbon, specifically how deep-sea life without any sunlight manages to get enough energy to survive at all. Scientists suspected that occasional large carcasses falling from far above might explain part of the answer. But almost everything tested before had been marine animals, whales, fish, things the deep sea might already recognize as food. So the team asked a stranger question. What if the carcass wasn't from the ocean at all? An alligator's hide is thick, bony, and armored, built to resist bites from other alligators on land. Researchers expected that armor might actually protect the carcass from deep-sea scavengers for a long time. 3 alligators were secured into weighted harnesses, each one lowered to around 2,000 meters on the continental slope of the northern Gulf of Mexico. Cameras and monitoring equipment were left in place to record whatever happened next. Nobody expected the answer to arrive as fast as it did.
The first alligator hit the seafloor completely intact, its thick hide untouched. Researchers expected that hide to hold up for weeks. It didn't even survive 2 days. Within just 43 hours, giant isopods, deep-sea crustaceans related to woodlice, had already broken through. These isopods can grow over a foot long, built specifically to survive long stretches without food. When they finally do find something, they eat as much as physically possible. Video from the site showed them tearing directly through the alligator's armored skin, something researchers hadn't expected any scavenger to manage that quickly. The tough hide that should have been a defense turned out to be barely an obstacle. Within days, the first alligator's soft tissue was almost entirely gone. It was the fastest breach of the entire experiment, and it was only the first surprise.
The second alligator told a slower, stranger story. When researchers returned to the site 51 days later, its soft tissue was completely gone. Only the skeleton remained, vertebrae, jaw, and ribs picked entirely clean. But something about the bones themselves looked wrong. They were covered in a strange brownish fuzz, almost like a stain spreading across the skeleton. At first, nobody was sure what they were looking at, so the team brought samples back to the lab for DNA analysis. What they found wasn't algae or bacteria or anything expected. It was a worm, a species that had never been documented in the Gulf of Mexico before. It belonged to a very specific, very strange family of animals, one built entirely around eating bone. The worm belonged to the genus Osidax, bone-eating worms, sometimes nicknamed zombie worms. Osidax have no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system of any kind. Instead, they grow root-like structures that bore directly into bone, dissolving it with acid. Bacteria living inside their tissue convert the dissolved bone into nutrients the worm can absorb directly. This particular species had never been recorded anywhere in the Gulf of Mexico, which meant this alligator had done something no whale carcass ever had. It revealed an entirely new species simply by existing in the wrong place at the wrong depth. Scientists still hadn't formally named the species by the time the study was published, a creature this specialized discovered purely by accident. Because someone decided to lower a reptile into an ecosystem it had no evolutionary business being in, nature filled the gap anyway. It always seems to.
The third alligator story didn't end with scavengers at all. Within just 8 days, researchers returned to find something unexpected. The alligator was completely gone. Not eaten down to bone, not partially consumed, simply gone. All that remained was the weighted harness, the shackle, and a length of rope dragged some distance from where it started. Whatever took it was large enough to rip an entire alligator free of solid mooring hardware. Researchers believe the most likely culprit was a large shark, drawn in by the scent from far away. But without direct footage, nobody can say for certain exactly what happened. One alligator stripped by isopods in under 2 days, one reduced to a bone-covered mystery in 51, and one that simply vanished, taken by something big enough not to leave a trace. 3 carcasses, 3 completely different endings. Taken together, this experiment answered more than just a question about alligators. It showed the deep-sea scavengers aren't limited to recognizing only familiar ocean-borne food sources. Given something entirely foreign to their world, they adapted almost immediately. Isopods broke through armor plating, evolved for a completely different environment. A previously unknown worm species turned out to be perfectly equipped to consume reptile bone. And something large enough to erase an entire carcass was patrolling the same depths, unseen. One of the researchers described the deep ocean as a food desert, scattered with rare food oases. This experiment showed exactly how fast and how completely life rushes toward one of those oases the moment it appears. It also raised a bigger question. If an alligator carcass could reveal a new species this quickly, what else is waiting to be found? Every unfamiliar thing that reaches the deep sea seems to become an opportunity for something down there. Nothing goes to waste. Nothing stays a mystery for long. 3 alligators, lowered 2,000 meters into darkness they never belonged in. One breached in under 2 days. One reduced to bone and covered in a worm nobody had ever seen before. One that disappeared completely, taken by something we may never identify. An experiment that started as a simple question about carbon ended up rewriting what we know about bone-eating worms in the Gulf of Mexico. The deep sea doesn't just wait for food to arrive. It finds a way to use absolutely everything, no matter how unfamiliar. If something this strange could happen from just 3 alligators, it's worth wondering what else is quietly being discovered down there right now. Subscribe to the Abyss Report. We go back down next week. See you in the deep.